what we realized is we have similar values. I think that is probably very important to co-founder success, because when you have similar values on things, you can also build trust, right? And that's what we invested a lot of time early on in our relationship as co-founders, to really build trust in each other. And maybe thirdly is like my overall life mission, which is to help as many people as possible achieve their potential and make as much impact as possible. So, I think even though my career will have twists and turns, this will be a constant in that, which will be helping people make as much impact as they can possibly make.
Hey listeners, welcome back to Inspire Someone Today. Today we have a special guest, someone who has figured the answers to his own journey and shaping the world by providing a framework for adoption and reference. With gratitude, welcoming the social innovator, change maker, and author, Roshan Paul, to Inspire Someone Today. Roshan, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Shrikant, and thank you to everyone listening. It's an honor to be here.
Roshan, in lot many ways, you're doing justice to Robert Frost's poem, The Road Less Traveled. What a journey it's been. Tell us, how was this seed sown and what a journey you have had so far?
Thank you for the question. I think the seed was sown probably in a few different ways. First, I would say, growing up in Bangalore, but with parents that were quite unconventional themselves. My father was a management consultant before that became a common term in India. In fact, he started one of India's first management consulting companies in the 70s when India was still socialist and wasn't much of a private sector. And my mother has been everything from a stockbroker to a marriage counselor. And so they never prescribed what we had to do growing up. You know how many Indian parents tell their children, you have to be an engineer, you have to be a doctor. They said, we are never going to tell you what you have to be, as long as you can be self-sufficient and take care of yourself when you're an adult. We don't really care what profession you take up. So that kind of sense of independence was sown in us from me and my sister from a very young age. I would say that's one. Second part was, as I said, being the child of entrepreneurs and unconventional thinkers, that informs you and influences you. Later on in my life, when I was studying innovation and studying entrepreneurship, I realized that most entrepreneurs are the children of entrepreneurs. There's something about the DNA that leads people to become entrepreneurs. And so perhaps that was another seed that was sown. And then maybe the most relevant seed to this conversation was, in some ways, when I went to the US for college. And my final year of college, as I was looking to decide what I wanted to do, maybe go into consulting like my father, or go into investment banking or something like that, like many foreign students in the United States, which is where I had gone to college. As I was thinking about all of that, one day I came out of my classroom and I walked over to the cafeteria for a cup of coffee. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. And I saw a bunch of students clustered around a TV screen. And that seemed unusual. 9 o'clock Tuesday morning, why is people standing on TV? Usually people are in a rush to get to class or have their coffee or whatever. And as I walked over to see what was happening, that's when I saw the second plane hit the second Twin Tower. And I saw the crash. I saw people jumping out of those buildings, saw them falling. And I just felt that something huge has happened today. And, 9/11 set the stage for my career in a way, because also it was followed by 3 months after 9/11, the terrorist attack on Parliament building in India, followed by the Gujarat riots, followed by the US bombing of Afghanistan. And so in 1 year, all of these things happened, and I was graduating from university. And so it seemed like the two countries I knew best, India and the US, they were on fire. And so what good would I do working in a management consulting company, helping to make an insurance company more profitable, or an oil company more, efficient, or whatever. So I decided at that point to make my career about something else. So I actually turned down an opportunity with a prestigious company in the US and returned to India and started working in social entrepreneurship. So that was probably the start of this journey.
That's a wonderful start. I don't know if you have realized it. One thing amongst the seed that was laid was much before or at the time you were born is your name itself, Roshan, which for a lot of our international listeners, the Indian meaning of Roshan is somebody who can give light. How true.
Thank you, Shrikant. I appreciate that. And what's interesting also is that that name Roshan is not just in India, right? It's also in Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Iran, other parts of the world. So it's starting to be a bit global, like how I see myself as well.
Well, you made a very interesting point. You saw the changes happening around you, and you said, I find my passion, I find my real meaning in helping the community or helping the society around you to kind of go through the change that you are looking for. That's when you turn down the offer of a prestigious job, as you said, to settle down for a $200 a month kind of a job back in India. And you did mention about the trigger. But my question there is, I think a decision like that is fraught with lot of naysayers, fraught with lot of frustrations down the line, saying that did I make the right choice? Is it for me? Kind of stuff. How did you manage this particular phase, and did it actually set the stage for something else for Roshan?
Absolutely. So, just to tell the story, so I came back to India and I started working for an NGO, and I was living in Delhi, making the equivalent of $200 a month, about 15,000 rupees. And even in 2003 in Delhi, that was not a lot of money. And sometimes I couldn't afford to maybe go out, have a nice meal. I was living in a paying guest accommodation. Sometimes I would just skip dinner, read a book, and sometimes I'd be eating on the streets and that damaged my stomach. So it wasn't easy, but it taught me a lot of things. It made me realize that at the end of the day, I'm still very privileged. I can quit my job and fly back to Bangalore, and my parents would be happy to have me there. So that was always an option, which of course the majority of the country that are lower middle class and below don't have that option. So I was extremely privileged and I was conscious of that. However, I was also determined to live within my means. So that's why I didn't try to borrow money from my parents or anything like that. What I did do was to try to find ways to supplement my income. I was always a good writer, so I did some writing for magazines and got some extra cash that way. And I put some money in the stock market and all of that. So it was a good lesson in finding ways to diversify your income while at the same time doing the work that you care about and doing the work that is interesting. Of course, there was a sense with society that this person's a bit crazy. So one of the stories I tell in my book is that we were at a wedding, and one of the my parents' friends, an auntie that I knew from a long time, but I was not in close touch with. She said, "Oh, you're back from the U.S. Are you working in consulting or banking?" And I said, "No, auntie, I'm working in an NGO." And the look of disappointment on her face, and she was very interested, probably trying to matchmake me with someone, and she just turned around and turned her back on me. So I think like there were examples like that, definitely, but at the same time there were lots of examples of people telling me, even back then, I wish I had the courage to do what you're doing. I wish that I could do this. I wish that my family would be okay with me doing this, things like that. And that started to grow as I started to grow in my career. Also, before I get finish that sentence, I should also say that the number of opportunities that I received to do that work were really meaningful. I got to travel to the Northeast, which most people don't get to go to, and really understand the culture there. I went to rural parts of Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh and things like that that I would otherwise never have been able to do, and really got to understand, my country in a different way. But through the work that I did, I started to, rise in my organization, and I got the opportunity to travel internationally and all of that, which people started to notice that and say like, hey, how are you doing that? How do you build a career in social impact? Through some of the work I did, I got invited to give talks at prestigious universities in the US and so on. And people were saying, okay, how is this guy who, started off his career turning down a fancy job making $200 a month? How is he now like traveling the world, giving talks at Harvard and World Bank and, places like that? Like, what's that story, right? So I think it set me up in a lot of different ways to have a very interesting and global career in a way that if I had taken the traditional path, I probably wouldn't have had.
The road less traveled is still a good one to do if you kind of figure out what needs to be done and the opportunities kind of lines up if you have an open mind. Is that the message out there?
Absolutely. And I would say that if you take the road less traveled, to use that metaphor, sometimes you come across unexpected, beautiful vistas, beautiful sights that if you people on the main road won't get to see.
How very true. And that set the stage for Amani, right? You started off this work and then you ended up setting up Amani. I let you to talk about Amani, the key highlights, and what's the future goals of Amani.
So, as I was saying, people were asking me, how do you do this? How have you built a career like this? A lot of my IIT, IIM type friends in India were saying, hey, I'm a bit bored at my corporate job. It doesn't have purpose. I just feel like I'm a cog in the machine. How do I do something more meaningful with my life? And this was happening to me, not just from friends in India, but also friends all around the world. And at the same time, I was speaking to a number of employers, and they were saying that they were having a hard time finding people that were ready for careers in social impact. That the university system was not doing a good job of preparing people for their careers. And so I started to feel like, hey, maybe I have an answer to this question. And I have a co-founder. I met someone from Argentina, very different life story than me, but had come to similar conclusions. And together we decided to start an organization to help people make that journey from having a sense of disillusionment and unfulfillment with their career to moving into some work that gives them more fulfillment. And our hypothesis was that that work needs to be work with social impact. Because if you think about it, from millennia ago, every religion talks about service, as the point of life, right? And today, modern psychology is catching up with that, and all of the research today shows that people who are involved in making other people, happier or better off or reducing suffering are more fulfilled as human beings. They're happier, they have better relationships with the people around them, and so on. So modern psychology today is catching up to what our, ancient religions have been saying for millennia. So our hypothesis was that people will be more fulfilled if they can make a difference in the world, make more impact. But as you said, we had taken the road less traveled to that journey, but most people hadn't. So how can we help them walk the journey that we had walked? So that was our question. And we started an organization called Amani Institute to answer that question. We were living, both of us, in Washington, D.C. at the time. I decided to turn down my green card track job in the US to move to Africa to start an NGO there, which, again, second time in my life, everyone thought I was crazy. So we moved to Kenya, to Nairobi, and we started the organization there, and it actually took off. It did pretty well. Amani Institute today is working with individuals as an education arm. It is helping people, runs courses to help people, enter the social impact sector, which is much bigger than most people think it is. It's not just NGOs. There's a huge range of opportunities. It is also doing consulting work with organizations around the world to help them train their staff, to build staff capacity for the 21st century, for the future of work. And Amani Institute is also working with small businesses to build leadership capacity in small and growing businesses to help them to grow and scale up, and so that they can hire more people and have a greater impact on the world. So Amani Institute today is quite a global organization. We launched in Brazil. We started in Kenya in 2012. We launched in Brazil in 2015, and then we came to India 2017, based in Bangalore. But from those three offices, we actually work all around the world. We've run projects in 30, 35 countries, and have helped more than 10,000 people today with their careers in some way through our programs, our events, and all of that. So Amani Institute's been a fantastic journey to be on, and we've learned so much about it, which is what we are writing about in our book, The New Reason to Work, which is all about trying to take the lessons that we've learned through a decade of helping people with their careers and put that into a structured journey that anyone can follow to build a more meaningful career.
A follow-on question from there on, Roshan, is I think you didn't just stop saying that I want to do something different, but you also realized that there are some elements that is lacking. So you went about putting up Amani, and that's the framework, that's the platform that people can leverage now. The other interesting piece, that's where I kind of tried to connect the dot between the work that you have been doing to what we are seeing in the corporate world, just not in India, across the globe, is this entire startup community, a lot of new age entrepreneurs, both in the impact world and also in the corporate world, coming through. And as they kind of mature, as they kind of build their organizations, one area where it is definitely seen with a pinch of salt is the constant friction or the lack of chemistry between the co-founders. Or you start off with an initial vision, but over a period of time, you kind of either tend to go apart, or the vision gets diluted, you end up doing something else. But what I see in your work is the wonderful chemistry that you have with the co-founders. What's the secret? What's the secret sauce that people can learn from it?
Maybe we just got lucky. Uh, but it's a good question. I think having been through this journey of the last 10 years with a co-founder who's, completely different background than me, right? She comes from another part of the world, from Argentina, extremely different culture than India, very different background in many ways. But what we realized is we have similar values. I think that is probably very important to co-founder success, because when you have similar values on things, you can also build trust, right? So, and that's what we invested a lot of time early on in our relationship as co-founders, to really build trust in each other, and that really worked. Like, we spent a lot of time together. We got to know each other very well. We met each other's families, all of that. But through all of that, we really began to trust each other, right? Like, I would give her the password to my bank account, no problem. I think then when you have that kind of trust in someone, that even when you disagree, it's not that we never disagreed. We sometimes had, like, intense fight, because it's not easy to build a business, not easy to build an organization, let alone an organization in three different continents, that three different cultures. So we didn't agree all the time. We disagreed a lot. But I think what helped was we always knew that whatever the other was saying was genuinely with the best interest of the organization. Like that, even if I completely disagreed with her, I knew that she was acting from her genuine interest in what was best for the organization, not her own personal interest. And I think she felt the same. So that allowed us to negotiate our differences, our disagreements, because we knew that at the end of the day, the other wanted truly what was best for the organization. So that, I would say, is the secret sauce in a way, is building that level of trust, so that that even when you fight, even when you disagree, you trust the other's intention, right? We never doubted the other's intent behind anything. We never questioned that. And I think that held us in very good stead.
Great. Another secret sauce to that is knowing when to kind of walk out and get the next layer of leaders to come in. I think you have done it beautifully. At the heights of its success, Amani, you decided to walk out and hand it over to the next generation.
Yes, that's right. So 10 years have passed since we started, and that seems like a good length of time to do any one thing in your life. I love doing different things. I love different challenges. And as much as I loved Amani Institute, and I still do today, I felt that it was maybe time that the organization can benefit from new leadership, new ways of thinking, a new way of growing. And so I didn't want to be one of those founders that stays on for too long and the organization becomes a bit boring under that person. I wanted to, bring in a new way of thinking. I also felt that when the pandemic hit, we had to change a lot of things. We had to move to a much more virtual mode of operation, because our training work at Amani Institute in the past was very much in person, with lots of personalized attention to every student. And we had to change and pivot that to an online model because of the pandemic. And that really succeeded. That pivot, that move to online worked brilliantly. And so we felt that if we are able to be profitable in a global pandemic year, the first year, 2020, there'll never be a better time to transition, because it shows the organization is resilient and can, move beyond its founders. And so that's why we also felt that, hey, the pandemic is showing us that this organization is ready to thrive without us as well. And so, putting those two things together, the potential for new leadership and the underlying resilience of the organization, we felt it was a good moment to leave and to do different things with our lives as well, and maybe pursue different challenges for ourselves as well.
So that's a barometer to kind of look into, saying that when the organization is ready, check on these two, three areas and then make that pivot.
At least for us, yeah, that seemed to work for us. I'm sure it's different with different organizations. We are a nonprofit, Amani Institute, so it's not like we had shares or we were trying to go public and make a lot of money. For us, it was, we don't own the organization; it's governed by a board of directors, and so it was a lot easier in a way then to say like, okay, I don't have a personal financial stake or anything in this. I have a emotional stake in seeing this organization have as much impact as possible, but it's a slightly easier perhaps to move out than in a nonprofit.
Great. So we are definitely here to discuss about the new reason to work. Before that, we will get to know the other side of Roshan. So Roshan, this is called as a power of three round. Three social impact stories from Sao Paulo, Nairobi, and Bangalore.
So Nairobi, one of my favorite stories is we had in our class, we had in one of our classes, there was two young men. One was a guy from Switzerland, his name was Gianmarco, and another was a guy from India, his name was Sriram. And they were interested. In our program, you have to do an innovation project. You have to take what you're learning in class and apply it into a real world project. And they were really interested in doing something for the street children of Nairobi, or the youth living in slums. And I'll spare you the whole process, but eventually what they came up with was the idea for, a lot of tourists go to Nairobi. Kenya is a very popular tourist destination. And they've said, like, what if we could do city tours of Nairobi led by the children who grew up on its streets? So see the city from the eyes of a street child. And that actually, so they started an organization that would train street children to lead city tours. And that really took off. It did really well. It is now listed in the TripAdvisor #1 thing to do in Nairobi. They've had, tourists from more than 100 countries have gone on that tour. And now they've actually moved out themselves. They've turned it over to be led by the youth that, are giving the tours. And both Gianmarco and Sriram have moved on in their lives as well. And so that's a beautiful story from Nairobi. From Sao Paulo, one story I really like is the story of another guy called Morris, who, he was really passionate about aging, a young guy in his early 30s probably. And he was passionate about helping the elderly community in Brazil, who were getting quite isolated from society in a way that's very common in the West and growing increasingly common in India too, I have to say. So what he did was create a platform where these elderly people could come together, they could find inspiration, they could find opportunities for ongoing professional development if they wanted, they could find opportunities to mentor others and find meaning and purpose despite having retired and all of that. And that also, has done quite well. And Morris is now considered a thought leader in Brazil. He writes a column in one of the big newspapers. He leads events and things like that. So that's another really good story from Sao Paulo. From Bangalore, again, I'm trying to, with all of these, there are so many options. I'm trying to pick one that would be easy to tell as well, because so often people's stories are beautiful, but they have ups and downs and they have twists and turns, and it's not so easy to tell those stories. But let me tell you a story of a young woman called Bhairavi. Unfortunately, early on in her life, she knew someone who committed at a very young age, who committed suicide. And she became very interested in seeing how we can do mental health support for young people in India, for children and college students. And so, she started an organization called Mitra Trust that helps college students and high school students to deal with mental health issues so that, they don't feel the need to take their lives. As you may know, India has the highest rate of youth suicides in the world. And so what Bhairavi is trying to do is to reduce that by giving young people in India more access to mental health resources than otherwise would be possible. And, she has been going through quite a complicated journey as an entrepreneur in a difficult field, but she's been persevering, and her organization is growing as well. So that's another story from the many that I could pick, but that's one that comes to my mind right now.
Wonderful. What powerful, impactful stories, Roshan. Thanks for sharing. Three things on Roshan's Make an Impact mission.
I'm getting quite interested in sustainability, particularly around travel, because we know that travel has a big carbon footprint, but at the same time, travel for me has given more joy in my life than anything else, perhaps. And so, I don't know the answers, but one of my social impact missions is to figure out how to make travel more sustainable. That would be one. Second one, perhaps related, is I'm really passionate about wild spaces, so wildlife, wild landscapes, and that's another area that I want to see what I can do to play a role in supporting and conserving, and so on. And maybe thirdly is like my overall life mission, which is to help as many people as possible achieve their potential and make as much impact as possible. So I think even though my career will have twists and turns, this will be a constant in that, which will be helping people make as much impact as they can possibly make.
Wonderful. Three book recommendations.
I'm a big reader, so you have to narrow the question down for me. What type of book?
I think since this is all about impact, let's kind of focus on in the field of social impact, the excellent book readings.
Well, one that comes to my mind immediately is a book I read recently called The Elephant Whisperer. It's about a guy in South Africa who sets up a national park, no, like a game reserve camp to protect a herd of elephants. And he was doing it anyway. But it's just a fantastic story of trying to do something against all the odds and all the difficulties of doing this. But it's a really beautiful story. So that would be one. A second one that I love is, set in India. It's called Infinite Vision. It's the story of the Arvind Eye Hospital in Tamil Nadu first, but, increasingly growing all around the country and influencing all around the world. And it's the story of the founder, Dr. V, and the spiritual approach that they brought to eye surgery as a family that really led to one of the most innovative organizations the world has ever seen, probably. So Infinite Vision would be a second one. And then thirdly, this book is a little bit probably outdated, but it has still, I think, a very powerful lessons to tell. Is a book called How to Change the World by David Bornstein, and it's a book about social entrepreneurship, about the field of social entrepreneurship, and you can see it from its early days what it was meant to be. And today, the word social entrepreneurship is used for any and everything, but it actually comes from a particular place, and this book will help you to understand that. And it has, again, beautiful stories from India, from Brazil, from Europe, about change makers that really stepped up to try to do something for other people.
Great. Thanks for those recommendations. The last of the Power of Three round. What are three unique routines that Roshan follows?
I'm trying to stay fit. That's something that is very important as you get older, and so trying to invest in my health. So only in my 40s have I started to enjoy running. So that's increasingly one. I always try to read a bit before going to sleep. I find, rather than, they say that you shouldn't be on your devices, right, last thing before going to bed. So I'm trying to put that into practice. So I always try to read one or two or three pages of a book before going to sleep. I think I actually do find it helps me sleep better when I'm not looking at my phone the last thing before going to bed. So that would be second. And then third, I would say I take every chance to get into nature as much as possible and as far away from the city or from people. I love going deep into the wilderness as much as I can. So that would probably be a third.
So therapy from the nature. Great. So Roshan, thank you so much. That was the Power of Three round. I hope you enjoyed this particular round. This conversation would be incomplete if we don't talk about Roshan, the author. And on the back of the bestseller, New Reason to Work, I'll let you to kind of talk about what is New Reason to Work and the motive behind it, and from there on.
Thank you, Shrikant. So, the new reason to work, and the subtitle is How to Build a Career That Will Change the World, is a book that my co-founder and I have just released that is designed to help people to have a meaningful career. It's targeted at people who have been working for a few years and want to make a shift towards work that is more meaningful, but don't know how to do that. And it's also targeted at young people that are coming out of university or a master's and are trying to build their career in social change. So those are the two audiences. So if you find yourself in one of those two audiences, or if you're the parent of someone in one of those two categories, or you're just looking for inspirational stories of ordinary people who have made a difference in the world, then this book is for you. You know, it's got stories from all around the world, from India, from the US, from Brazil, Kenya, and other places, and quite a structured approach to helping people realize we can intentionally build a career that has the potential of having a much greater impact in society than just what we could do by ourselves or than we would if we were just focusing on a career that's about making money.
Great. I must say, from what a little I have read about the book, Roshan, it's very unique conversational type. You can kind of really put yourself, insert yourself as being part of that conversation and be part of the discussion. So great stuff there.
Thank you. We wanted to make it very easy to read and engaging and really try to answer questions that people who are reading this book will have, you know, like, so we really try to put ourselves in the mind of the reader. Fortunately, we have a decade of helping people do this. So we know the questions that people have, the questions that people ask. So we wrote the book as a conversation between us and the potential reader so that it's a very Q&A kind of story.
True that. And what I love about that as well is, like you rightly said, it is for somebody wanting to get into it, a kind of an handbook
Mm-hmm.
for people who actually want to kind of get into the know-how of it. You also have tools and techniques to kind of go figure things out as well. So in that way, it kind of caters to both the segments of the audience.
That's right. Exactly.
So as we talk about it, you did mention about there are quite a lot of stories in the book. Any one or two anecdotes that you would want to share with the listeners out here?
I've shared a few, I think, that already are from the book, but let me tell you one that I think had a big impact on me when so I'd returned to India to set up Amani Institute in India. And, you know, when you're starting up something, you look for as much support as you can get from all different sources. So one day my mother told me that there's a friend of hers who is a well-known businessman in Bangalore and a well-known entrepreneur, social entrepreneur in Bangalore. And he was interested to talk to me and see how he can support me. So I went to his office to meet with him. You know, he was a much older gentleman, very nice chap, and we had a good conversation. And we looked at ways in which we can collaborate, do things together. You know, he said he would support us, and then he said to me, he said this word, "With him," and I said, "What?" And he said, "With him," and I said, "I don't know what you mean." And he said, "With him, it means what's in it for me." And that really took me aback, you know, like I had come from a world in which you try to collaborate to genuinely support other people. And for me, networking was not about what I can get from it only. It was also about genuinely what I can give to other people and help other people. So, you know, I tried to explain to him that, at that moment I was so startled. I said, "Let me think about it and I'll get back to you." But then later I sent him an email saying that in my own life, I found that the most things come back to me when I give without looking for something in return. And, you know, I contrast that story with another story from another friend of mine in the US who, you know, was offering all kinds of support. And I said, "Hey, what can I do to help you?" And he said, "It doesn't matter. Like maybe one day in our friendship, you know, you'll be able to help me. But for now, there does not have to be quid pro quo. You know, you don't have to give me something right now in return for this that I'm giving you." So for me, that was a good contrast. And you know, one of the tools in the book that we're talking about is the role of networking in building your career and in providing you a sense of community and a feeling that, you know, you are not alone in your quest to do this, right? When I made that decision at 22 to turn down a prestigious job to move back to India and work in an, you know, for a low salary, would have been nice to be part of a group of other people who are doing that, right? So building community, building networks is very important. And so We use these two contrasting stories to explain one thing about networking that most people don't know, which is that networking is not about what you can get from others, it's about what you can give to others, right? So instead of whiffim, we said this does not go with, but it's like, how may I help you? That's the most important question in networking is how may I help you? And so if you can go with that philosophy, with that approach in mind, then you probably be more successful at networking and also actually happier as well, because you're not approaching a conversation or an interaction as a transactional thing, but as something to build a relationship.
Wonderful story out there. I think one of the other pieces that comes to my mind as I hear out to you, Roshan, is for a lot many people who want to get into this particular space, the notion is unless until it is not big, unless until it's not impactful, I can't be making an impact to the world. So if only if the idea is big, only if the cause is bigger than the life kind of a purpose is when I want to get into this. What would be your take to folks like that? Should it always be big?
Absolutely not. I would say, I think it's important to have a purpose that's big, a purpose that's bigger than you, right? So, let's say that you're interested in gender equality. That's something that you by yourself cannot do, right? Like it's something that has been in society for thousands of years, and everyone needs to play a role in gender equality. Like, let's say you're interested in supporting or preventing children from being on the streets, right? Again, this is a problem that's been in society for hundreds of years, and you by yourself cannot do that. So I think it's important to have a purpose in life that is greater than your own existence, greater than your own needs, right? You're in service of something that's bigger than yourself. But once you've identified what that is, you don't have to then join an organization that is addressing that at scale. Of course, that's one way to do it, but you can also, do something in your own street. You can do something in your own city. You can join a club. You can join a group of like-minded people that are doing this. You can join a startup that is working on an issue. There are many levels at which you can have an impact. There's very many levels at which you can work. The problems that we face are complicated and they're large, and we need everyone to contribute. So whether somebody's contribution is best made by, let's take education, for instance, right? Some people, for instance, their best contribution can be with being a teacher in a school, right? They can influence, thousands of young minds in their career that way. For another person, their best contribution to education could be creating a new startup, let's say an ed tech, an app or something that provides a different way of learning, and they're an entrepreneur and they're an engineer and they build an app that is going to help children learn in a different way. Or let's say somebody is working in the government, in the education ministry, and they really want to create a new policy that can help a child to do something, to have a better education, right? Improve the schools, improve the teacher training, improve the curriculum in many different ways. So you start to see that no matter like what you're best suited for, whether you're best suited to be a teacher or an engineer, or a policymaker, there is a role for you to make education better, and so you take that in any field, whether it's health, whether it's environmental protection, whether it's renewable energy, whatever it is, like no matter who you are, there is a role for you to play based on your strengths, your interest, your passion. And so, what I would say is, I encourage everyone to find what they are best suited for, because that's when they will be their most fulfilled and happiest. And do that. Don't try to fix everything because you can't. We need everyone to contribute. You by yourself can't fix everything. So do your best to in the area that is most fulfilling for you. And that's all we can ask of anyone, I think.
No, that's very well articulated. To each their own. Find the purpose and go behind that.
Exactly.
So wrapping up on the new reason to work, what was your aha moment when you put all of this book together and say, okay, this makes sense, a whole lot of sense that you were missing while you were in the profession, while you were in the impact sector, to what the book is going to give it to the reader?
One aha moment, of course, there were many aha moments in putting this book together, putting a decade of experience of supporting 10,000 people from all around the world, in 70, 75 countries to build more meaningful careers. So there were many aha moments through that. But one that I would like to, so the book is structured as, we have 6 principles or 6 keys to unlock your career in social impact. And we explain all of those keys. But in the conclusion chapter, we talk about a 7th key that we don't explain in detail, but that came as an aha moment from one of our interviews for the book. And that is, it's a personality kind of thing. It's not a skill, I would say, but it's a personality thing to say yes when chance comes knock. We call it say yes when chance comes knock, right? It's the ability to identify an opportunity, even if that opportunity doesn't come in a moment of convenience or in exactly what you were thinking, exactly what you were hoping, but nevertheless to seeing possibility in every situation and knowing when to say yes to something, even if it's not exactly what you want, but it can lead to something powerful or something beautiful. So we say that that's another important principle in building a fulfilling life and a meaningful career, is knowing when to say yes to opportunity, to say yes to chance, and to see that as something that you can always be on the lookout for. So one of our interviews from the book said that that's what distinguished her career, was that she had made many different career changes, but she always said that she was seeing an opportunity that others had not seen, and she was acting on that. And I think that was a very powerful aha moment for us when putting the book together.
Wonderful. So we'll definitely provide the link to the book in the show notes, listeners, so that you can go and look out for this book. And fantastic read. Once again, Roshan, congratulations on your book. And we had great time discussing about the impact sector, discussing about your journey through the process and your book. This show is all about inspiration, creating ripples of inspiration. So before we kind of sign off today's episode, what is Roshan's Inspire Someone Today message to all the listeners out there?
Well, I want to first say thank you for having me on again. It was such a privilege to be here. And, anyone who's listening, thank you for taking the time to listen. If you're still listening, thank you even more. If I was to say one message to people, I would say, take the first step today. You don't worry too much about where something is going to lead to, or strategize, or even make a big decision like quitting your job or something like that. I would say, in the service of something that you think would be fulfilling for you and making a difference in the world, take the first step today, whether that is to read a book on a topic or have a conversation with someone who's an expert on it or watch a documentary, whatever it is, start to move, start to do something. And then one thing leads to another in ways that you can't ever predict, and beautiful things happen that way. So that would be my message.
Beautiful things will happen by taking that first step. On that note, Roshan, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Inspire Someone Today.
Thank you for having me, Shrikant. Such a pleasure to be here.
Hey listeners, this month we launched our website. If you've not checked it out, do check it out at www.inspiresomeonetoday.in. And as part of the launch, we announced 5 lucky winners to get the Inspire Someone Today goodies. And I'm happy to announce the 5 winners. Yasmin Ansari, Vishwanath Krishnamurthy, Madhavi Karnam, Ranjit Kota, and Anshul Arora gets the goodies for promoting the website and being forever raving fans. Thank you all for your support, and watch out for more coming your way. Thank you for listening into today's edition of Inspire Someone Today. It's been a privilege to bring in these conversations. If you like this episode and have any feedback or comments, do mail me at inspiresomeonetodaypodcast@gmail.com. Inspiring someone is like creating ripples around us. If you like what you listen, feel free to share them and let's create ripples of inspiration. Do not forget to follow me on my Instagram handle @InspireSomeoneTodayPodcast for all the latest updates. This is Shrikant, your host, signing off, and until next time, keep inspiring.